Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is my enormous pleasure to have you at this discussion on the new generation and politics. Does the current conflict with the EU make any sense? My guests are Ms. Kaleta, Mr. Kaleta, Mr. Śpiewak, Mr. Krzysztof Bosak, and Mr. Matysiak. Mr. Bosak and Mr. Kaleta have been in politics for a very long time, although Mr. Kaleta was not a member of parliament in the beginning. So I wonder about this new generation. Still, going back to this dispute with the EU, since there's so much talk about Polexit, does it make sense to argue about the situation in Poland and talk about leaving the EU? This is very important because the issue of Polexit is boomeranging. Where does it come from, and is it at all possible? Ms. Matysiak, Member of Parliament. I knew I was to be asked first since I'm the only woman on the panel besides the moderator. Let me start with the fake news. We know that the support for EU membership among Poles is very high. And recent studies of CBOS say 90% of Poles support our membership in the EU. Of course, that study also included other issues, like the issue of rule of law, Turów. The spread is different there, but in terms of our support for membership, it's really high, much higher than in Western countries. So every political group that might wish making us leave the EU, that's a crazy idea. But going back to the panel and the discussion of whether we need this argument, my understanding is that debate, argument, negotiation is a basis of a democracy. Without them, we cannot function. Only in a debate, only in an argument can we win something for the Polish interest. So, well, we'll see. Let's see what other panelists have to say. But it seems that we will agree about the fact that without having a discussion we cannot make gains. That's by way of introduction on my part. I had the impression that the question was strange. Sure, a dispute makes sense, but what kind of dispute, what kind of argument we need to define what we're talking about? Is it about specifics, specific issues, like Turów, rule of law, or stirring up an argument between the EU and Poland in order for us to be disciplined, to be punished at the end of the day? Sebastian Kaleta, please. Indeed, the question whether it makes sense to argue with the EU in the light of current discussions, the alternative is simple. We either discuss, we either argue, or we are subdued, because we either lose an important element of our sovereignty, or we discuss and try and lead the dispute in such a direction that the outcome is as positive for Poland as possible. In order to define how to hold this discussion, we should start by making some order, putting some order in our discussions with the EU. that are currently underway. The current argument, for starters, has not been caused by Poland. The EU, looking at what was happening in Poland and the Polish situation, it was looking with disapproval and taken into account the expectations of the opposition, of the Polish opposition. The EU decided to enter into an argument with Poland to limit the support for the governing party. From the point of view of the source of that argument, we have a number of planes for this discussion. The first one is the most long-term, most complex plane regarding the rule of law. The second dispute regards energy. This dispute was rather a hallway discussion, because we know that for a number of years the nuclear energy policy has been negotiated, and Poland is, in the light of that negotiation, treated as the country that's going to pay most for this transition, and naturally it opposes to such a drastic increase of climate goals. The third argument is about society and ideology that is being embedded in the law, in the EU programs, in the public debate, and its results in many areas of our everyday life. The gender ideology, the LGBTQ ideology. Let's not go into definitions of what gender ideology is. Of course, the left sees it differently, but it's a set of postulates in a shift in how we see family life, sexuality, and gender. There's a number of discussions caused by this plane, and we've seen enormous pressure and financial blackmail towards local authorities in Poland who decided to support pro-family policies, family understood as men and women, couples having children. This declaration was attacked by the EU, so this conflict is a very realistic one. In light of resolutions about discrimination and etc., that's very important. And another conflict, or meta-conflict, is one regarding the EU and member states and their role in the EU. Yesterday, a number of panel discussions showed that the essence of this conflict is that the role assigned to Poland and the point of accession was the role of periphery pinned to Germany, France, the UK. The UK was the break in many solutions. The UK is not there anymore. They had their concerns about federalization of the EU. And Poland has done a lot to shed that role of periphery. I'm proud to see that Poland has been on the front line of what's happening now on this plane. That is, the issue of primary character of constitutional law over the EU law. Poland has won supporters among intellectuals and experts in many important countries of the EU. This proves that this is a very important dispute, crucial for the future of Europe. And on each of these planes, I am of the belief that our country should courageously, but also thoughtfully, pursue its interest. And I have been a proponent for many months, and I've stressed this publicly on a number of opportunities. That is, I'm a proponent of the approach along the lines that we cannot be paralyzed in such a conflict. We are fighting a stronger opponent, and yet the longer we demonstrate our determination, the more the opponent, but also partner in this case, is fighting for its interest. And that's a way to bounce out of this periphery character. Sure, we need to argue, we need to discuss, we need to present our argument. The EU currently is not the same EU we entered 16 years ago. Currently, Poland has changed since. Also, we have ways to present our arguments, but also there's a very well-defined course of the EU institutions against Poland. How do we deal with that? I don't know if there's one single way. I've heard there's thousands or tens of thousands of such ways. We need to find the best one. But definitely opposing to demands and political automata is the first step to do that. And answering the title question, I say that I'm of the belief that a conflict is unavoidable because treaties are general, unclear, and the EU has specialized in conflicts based on treaties, and what we see now is a replay of what we saw a dozen years ago about the order of the EU. I don't completely agree with the fact that the statement that the EU has changed. I think it now only reaches our awareness what EU is. There was a period when Austria was ostracized for their attitude at the time of Chancellor Hitler, much more than the Morawiecki government currently. The project of constitution for the EU was ready-made when we joined the EU. Remember about that. The referendum rejecting the European Constitution in France took place in 2005, or four. Mr. Wildstein says, thank you. Right after our accession, the Lisbon Treaty is a reformulation of the Constitution for Europe. And the conflict has its source in the Treaty of Lisbon, precisely. So not much has changed since, and the whole conflict regarding the primary character of the Constitution above the EU law. This rule was formulated for a long time before we joined the EU, and the whole trend of Euro-federalism in all kinds of versions, in Christian democratic, left, etc., was very well defined from the start as well. So the conflict between Poland and the EU, in my opinion, is structural in character. And it is going to continue also when law and justice have left the power, the government. Because the majority of Polish society is definitely in opposition to what is defined as European values, as defined by the mainstream from the extreme left to the central right in the EU. The other thing is that the treaties are blurry. Currently we have something between a confederacy and association, everything is unclear. There are several centers of power, so they're all going to compete for power, which is natural. Those who want to go for a federation will take orders from Brussels. Those that have independence and sovereignty at heart will oppose. Let me now comment on what my four speakers said. I would like to note that support for our membership in the EU has started dropping, and I think that pro-EU forces have seen that, and that's why they organize marches and manifestations. And referring to Mr. Kaleta, I'd like to say that Poland is not opposing the raising of climate goals. Mr. Morawiecki agreed to that increase last year, and we don't know what we got in exchange because we haven't heard of any in the meantime.
I wouldn't agree that the union was the same 16 years ago as it is now, because this stricter course is becoming even more intense, and that stems from the fact that nowadays Germany took the leading role. Before we had the statement of the French president to stay silent, to sit silent. So now this course is even more intense and it's stricter. And now a question to a sociologue, to Mr. Jan Śpiewak, to sum up this part of questions. So is it really so? Because that's also a question. These slogans that we don't want to exit EU, does it really reflect the social tensions? And because this is just a fake news, do these people know about it? And the second part, how to manage this dispute to let Poland win? That's the most important. Poland, so who? That's the most interesting person. We do not divide Poland. It's all about that it's an introduction of some conscious division between Eurosceptics and Euro supporters. I think that this dispute is much more complex. But when it comes to our support for the EU, I think that this support is rather shallow, and that may end up. We're talking about the European Union. We talk about the European Union through the prism of money transfers and regulations. And the European Union is the union of interests. It's not a union of values. Of course, the German interest is the most visible, and it is this German imperialism. This is the tool that generates a lot of tensions and conflicts. And I'm not talking about conflicts with Poland, but let me recall you what happened in Greece some time ago. And in Southern Europe, the countries are in more difficult situation because of this German leadership in the European Union, and it's not. There are many discussions inside Europe about the shape of the European Union, so it's not just the representation of interest of the core. Viktor Orban didn't bother Germany. Is he still in the party or not? No, he left. No, he left himself. But nobody expelled him from the EPP in the European Parliament, because there was one thing, that there are some German factories. In factory, there are some new cars being manufactured in Hungarian facilities. So that dispute is a dispute about the final shape of the European Union. Should it be the union of the commonwealth of interests of elites, or should it be a union of general interest of all European citizens and communities? And we're talking about, for example, a dispute over energy. This is the dispute that was that we are imposed some climate goals, but who is going to pay for this energy transition? The poor people, no matter whether poor people in Germany or poor people in Poland. Of course, the structure of our economy is that we will pay much more for that. But do we have these emissions? Maybe this is emission, CO2 emission of the German industry located in Poland. So that's the question. When it comes to the rule of law, I do not understand that dispute. I know that our courts, they do not work much better as they used to before. So I can see, I would like to lead this dispute in order to guarantee the European citizens a certain level, to have a dispute so as every citizen has a right to clean air, to health care, and to leave a good world for future generations. As Mr. Kaleta said, this is an attempt to springboard from this peripheral position. I would like this dispute to be managed, but is it really so that for the last 80 years we changed our position? Did we stop being peripheral? Have we become even more independent? We didn't set up a masks factory in the pandemic, so our lifetime shortens. Our universities are the worst in Europe. We have one of the highest labor costs. We are the assembly line of Europe, and these are important issues that should be discussed and should be fought for, and not about any disputes which are unclear to me and which are just disputes between our elites inside Poland. But we don't fight for a change of our status as Poland from peripheral to core state. And I'm not interested in a dispute like that. When it comes to Viktor Orban, let me tell you that Viktor Orban was a pain in the neck, because I can remember 2011, the left-leaning European MPs, when Viktor Orban took over the presidency, he couldn't speak. They had something on their lips. The lips were sealed. So on one hand, that was a protest against Viktor Orban, but on the other hand, they didn't expel him. So there are some random actions being taken, some pretending that they do something. So to what extent is it a really apparent superficial movement, and to what extent this is a pressure in order to start this long march through Polish institutions in order to, as Granchi said, to change the attitude of Polish people to different EU institutions and different areas of our lives? Dear MP. So let me start with explanation to what Mr. Bosak said. The survey that I quoted that you wanted to explain comes from October this year. This has been carried out by CBOS. What is the opinion of the Polish people on the European Union? 95% of respondents said that they are supporters. 6 against, and the rest didn't have any opinion. And in comparison to the same from December 2020, we can see that the group of supporters went up by 2%. Opponents didn't remain the same, and not decided went up by 2 percentage points as well, just to make it clear. But when it comes to this discussion about our position in the European Union and how the European Union itself should look like, I would like to continue something that Janek Śpiewak said before. That's interesting. What will be the final shape of the European Union, and what will be the benefit for Poland coming from this position in the European Union? And I'm convinced deeply that stronger integration in the European Union may bring some benefits. You've mentioned energy transition. We know that it's ahead of all of us. We all feel climate changes and the climate catastrophe coming. If we don't do anything as politicians here in Poland and on the level of the European Union, our life will end for us on this planet. We know that climate change comes from the human activity, and we need some real steps to be taken, and that is something that should be discussed. We have to discuss money that Poland could get to build a nuclear power plant, because the civic platform government didn't do so, despite the fact that Donald Tusk promised us nuclear power nuclear power in 2020. Now we can hear that soon we will learn about the first location, and soon we will see some work started, but we are all aware that this is a huge amount of money and a huge investment, and the European Union is the very place to discuss such issues, to defend our national interest, our energy security of every Polish household, and the fact to prevent Polish from getting poorer and poorer. And of course that will be a clash of interest, because the Germans, they don't want us constructing nuclear power plants. The Germans themselves, they're resigning from their nuclear power plants, despite the fact that they still have some, and they want to force us in the situation when we buy gas coming from Russia to Germany, and that is a threat that we should protect ourselves and against, and we should talk about this on the European Forum. So that's only one example that we should fight for. But of course, there is much more such topics. I'm not supporter of the Eurozone. If the integration on the European level will not continue, there will be no shared systems of economic growth and social growth and some social programs, pan-European social programs. The Eurozone can end up for us in the same manner as it ended up for Greece and for the southern European countries. Yeah, it's enough to talk to citizens of companies, of states that implemented euro recently, and what is the situation of their households. The situation is just dramatic. So if we talk about the European Union itself, we can hear one voice of the hegemon, but on the other, the topics related to climate change are imposed on us. Of course, we have this shutdown of coal mine in Turów that will end up in a catastrophe for the citizens, for the dwellers of this region, for the people employed in the mine, but also for other providing service for it. And some wise steps should be taken here with regard to climate change. So to what extent can they interfere with our matters, with our issues? We have learned not so long ago. So the coalition of countries could see what are the steps taken by Germany that are the leader in Europe now. Is it possible to build such a coalition in order to stop what's going on there? Sebastian Kaleta? First question, whether these disputes are real or not. Each of these disputes, at least the ones I named, they are realistic. Of course, we can set some priorities. We can name which is the most important. We're talking about sovereignty, economy. These elements these are priorities for different groups. But starting from the most important economic issue, the energy transition, because the MP Matysiak said that it's a matter for whole Europe, but the conclusion is that the climate politics served by the European Union tries to impose us, but it raises some doubt whether it would lead to our society getting poorer and poorer. That was the first concern. The second concern was about the Eurozone, lack of control over our own economy, which was felt painfully by the Greek. So the dispute that we have with the European Union on several levels, it's realistic. Because if we allow this energy transition to be implemented as the Germans wanted to be implemented. Because Solidarna Polska, even before the Confederation, you've pointed out the European Council, we said that through Nord Stream 2 we will be forced to buy gas. And due to that fact, Germany will make the European Union dependent on Russia. So that's an important dispute. And moving towards the rule of law, what are the steps the European Union takes with regard to Poland? One person, Judge de la Puerta, who was appointed as a judge of the Court of Justice directly from the Ministry of Justice. Overnight, she instructed to shut down a coal mine, and because of that, a lot of 3 to 4 million Poles lost their access to electricity and heating. So I couldn't find ever before such a strange decision being taken by court. I'm sorry, but I think that during the German occupation, the way of management was quite similar. As Professor Zalatkevich posted on Twitter, he said that you cannot question the decisions of the German courts because they decide what will be the law in Poland in the context of the rule of law. So that shows that Poland today is not only in the middle of this dispute, but we are a guinea pig, and they experiment how the peripheral states are imposed and how different solutions are forced in peripheral state. So the judicial issues that relates to sovereignty and to the regime. And during the previous panel, Professor Gontarski mentioned some decisions of the Court of Justice that causes that these are just they are the first such decisions being taken ever, so they are very important. So what is the essence of the problem here? Because during the previous panel, part of the Polish professors of law, for example, from the Polish Academy of Sciences, they stated 3 times this year that the Court of Justice said that the European law is prevailing over the Polish law. At the same time, the Ministry of Justice, since the day of this decision, we pointed out that that something has to be done, because for the first time ever, the Constitutional Tribunal indicated that this also but other countries have the same problems with their judicial systems. In Romania, for example, and in September it was stated for the 3rd time. So it is not like that these are just apparent disputes. These are realistic disputes. And what happens if we decide and if we agree that it doesn't matter? This is with Turów, this is quite realistic, because people that touches and that affects households, so people understand. But as one editor said during the December summit, he wrote that the Poles understand that they didn't have their own independent state. It was like the second partition. So the processes that took place before for many years, and it was visible and apparent that what is the objective. It was not felt by the society, only the real changes caused this awareness. So what is the essence of this dispute over judicial system? The European Union tries to force the Polish people to acknowledge that our decisions with regard to our regime, our electoral decisions, can be non-effective if the Brussels officials decide otherwise. So we can dispute about the final shape of our courts, but the European Union tries to tell us, you can choose your MPs, you can choose your government, but if you want, as the Polish people, if you want to affect the composition of judge bench, we will interfere. So this element, the 3rd power in Poland, will be under the supervision of Brussels, and that is the essence of this dispute. Maybe we do some things wrong. We can dispute about that in Poland, but we cannot allow to lose our fundamental impact as a nation on such a vital element of governance. And to sum up, also in the context of the social dimensions of this dispute, we see that Poles are imposed also through financial and institutional chantage some solutions with regard to upbringing of children and regulations and the relationship between people and family members. And it's a real dispute as well. Let me set as an example. We vetoed last month the strategy of the European Commission on children's rights. Great ideas, but there was an element in this strategy that the European Commission plans the regulations on civil law acts to regulate the status of the so-called rainbow families. And there were three links from this first and basic documents. So to hide it in a way, this is how the European Union creates its law. So it is embedded, there are links, there are different and in preamble there is a statement that there are some 20 documents being adopted for the purpose of introduction of some solutions. So Poland and Hungary vetoed these solutions, and the ministries of justice of other countries, these are both about kids, and we said that if they will not get rid of some clauses, we will veto that. And so the only thing we wanted to veto was related to this gender and so on. And it was not about pedophiles, some social security, only ideological issues. So this ideological dispute is quite realistic, and it is translated into many elements of the European law. Okay, we have to, as we're running out of time, we have to finish because Professor Nowak will have to start on time due to the lack of time today. So let's start a summary starting from Jan Śpiewak. Please answer a question. Which dispute, in your opinion, is the most important now? And where is the place where can we win that dispute? I would like that this fundamental dispute between us and the European Union, I would like to see that this is the dispute about our position in the European Union, not as a peripheral member state, but as an independent and core state. But this dispute will have to take place in Poland, not in Brussels. Because it's not like that somebody told us not to do anything about Polish energy market in Poland. Slovakia built its nuclear power plant. We also attempted to do so in Żarnowiec, but they secured that, and they have 50% of energy in their energy mix. It's nuclear. It's not like that somebody told us not to select the location for nuclear power plant in Poland. It's not like that that somebody told us to have a job market based on exploitation of cheap labor force or based on cutting Polish trees without any limits. So this is the dispute of Poland, how elites can function. We still have some post-communist elites that are supposed to represent the central views that manage the colony on behalf of the Western countries, or maybe do we want to see some change in the mindset? But this is a dispute that we have to resolve here in Poland, and Brussels will not support us in that in any way. I may just add to end something a bit controversial, that the progress in Poland and modernization for the last 2 years came with arms, the abolition of farmers' labor, slavery, and other things. So this is I tell it to the Polish elites who do not represent the Polish interests, but they just fight against each other. So I would put it like this, and I would like to reformulate this discussion. I would like to talk about such things. And we will talk about this after the panel. And now to Mr. Krzysztof Bosak, which dispute is the most important to you and the most dangerous for Poland? Is it really the dispute over the energy market or anything else? I cannot agree that the progress and fight against illiteracy came from some external sources, so let me protest. This is negligence of years of work within independent Poland and years of effort. So when it comes to disputes about economy and energy market are very important, but the most important disputes concern the regime and culture. The Polish society gives up on defending its social norms, and rule of law is directly, and conflict over rule of law is directly related to our identity and to culture. So we have to decide whether we want to just follow the suit or and photocopy European norms, or to have our own. So this cultural dispute is central point, and we cannot agree that somebody external will tell us what the civic rights are and what democracy is and what human rights are, because Minister Kaleta mentioned the dispute over judicial system and rule of law, but in the next step the European Union may define democracy for us. There are some treaty stipulations. There is a word, democracy, that it's a European value, so that may appear that Eurocrats decide that our elections are not democratic. So I'm glad to hear some voices from the left with some selective approach to European integration, that you mentioned mostly threats resulting from the energy policy, the German gas and so on. So if the left and the right will perceive it in the same way, in this way we will defend and we will end this dispute. But if we will be living our insecurities, that we have to explain ourselves before the European Commission, and that is self-humiliation, and we cannot live in these conditions as a sovereign country. We have to come over this element, and I think that 1 year is enough. So my appeal to the Polish government, please, let's be proud of yourself and defend your rights. Okay, we have to, and we didn't manage to talk about alliances, because alliances of conservative alliances are very important. Alliances with groups that think alike, because there are some people willing to stop this energy madness, but hopefully we will continue our talks in couloirs. Paulina Matysiak from the left, Krzysztof Bosak from Confederation, Paweł Śpiewak is a sociologue and an activist. I always mistake you, and Sebastian Kaleta, Vice Minister of Justice, an MP for the same Solidarna Polska. My name is Dorota Kania from Polska Press. Thank you very much.